sir.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to join the Indian History Forum and share some stray thoughts with you about the origin of the clothes we wear and the food that we eat, and also about the architecture that has evolved in India, especially in North India, uh, between the 12th century to the 17th, 18th century. Now, the last segment I may not have time for because that is a separate. So I'll just roughly touch on it. But any one of you who's interested, this is part of a separate standalone lecture which has been published as a book recently by Siegel Publishers, and the book is called The Music of Stones. And if any one of you are interested, you could order them online, the book online. The Music of Stones, published by Siegel Publishers. So I'll begin talking essentially focusing on the clothes we wear and the food that we eat. And this search began about 15 years ago when, or maybe a little earlier, when constantly these issues were being thrown up about identity, and it was being said that such and such is not Indian and so is not Indian, and the harking back to mythological past going back 5,000 years or earlier, etc. So it is during this time that I started thinking of the food we eat and the clothes we wear. I'll talk about the clothes first. Now, there are a couple of things to remember. India is one of the earliest civilizations in the world, aside from Egypt, where cotton cultivation first began, roughly the same time, maybe a couple of centuries here, there. But we are one of the earliest people who discovered cotton. We began to cultivate it, and we began to collect the wool and then convert it into fabric. We have found cotton seeds in Mohenjo-daro, in Harappa, in the Indus Valley civilization. And so from then on, about 5,000 years, we have been weaving fabric. There's this famous bust, for some reason, I don't know why, but he was declared as a uh, tribal chief or something. And this is a middle-aged man with a beard. It's a trimmed beard, and he has a length of cloth thrown across one shoulder. The other shoulder is bare, and on that cloth there is the shape of the uh, club. If any one of you, if most of you would have seen the symbol that we use on cards: hearts, clubs, spade, and diamond. So the shape of the club is, uh, you can see on that little figurine, terracotta figurine that has been discovered. And that is some evidence of fabric, textile, and all the art of printing. But this is not the only evidence that we found. We also found seeds, and we found cotton seeds, and we found fiber, cotton fiber. So we know from then on we have been weaving cotton. But surprisingly, we do not have any Indian garment which is stitched. Stitched garments are not Indian. One of the reasons could have been that we did not have scissors. And unless you have scissors, you can't cut cloth. Cloth that is taken off the loom, you can wear it. You can wear it as a lungi, you can wear it as a dhoti, you can wear it as a sari, you can wrap it around your head as a headgear, but all these are unstitched. Lengths of cloth, there is no sewing involved in it. When you begin to sew, then you have to create the opening for the neck. You have to make the opening for the sleeve. You have to fold the cloth to make a covering for your legs and for your torso. This cannot be done without scissors. And there were no scissors in India before the Greeks came. It came with the Greeks. And therefore, all these stitched garments that we have in India, that we wear on a daily basis, none of them is of Indian origin. The kurta, the kameez, the chemise, the blouse, the petticoat, the pajama, these are all garments that we have been wearing in India for a very long time, for hundreds of years. But all of them came to India from outside. Robes, the kind of robes, say the Kashmiris wear, called the phiran. The phiran is a corruption of the Persian word parahan. That became the phiran. And that is the kind of robe you see in medieval paintings in Persia. All of them were wearing those kind of robes. So they arrived when those people came here and they became a part of our attire. Nobody wore the blouse before the 19th century. And there are two specific instances. The Brahmo Samaj, Rabindranath Tagore was a member of the Brahmo Samaj, as was Abhinandanatھ Tagore and Gangendranath, the entire family of Rabindranath Tagore, and there were a large number of other people who had joined the Brahmo Samaj, and it was a reformist movement. They were promoting the wearing of the blouse among women. There was a conference held in Bengal opposing the blouse as something that had been introduced by the Mlechas and that it was an assault on our culture. We'll leave this there. There is another story from Kerala. And this I learned from Professor K.N. Panikkar, one of our tallest historians of modern India, and later also a vice chancellor of a university in Kerala. So I was talking to him about something, and we were talking about fabrics and clothing and all that. And he told me this story. There is a freedom fighter and a rationalist in Kerala, and he's arrested by the British and thrown into prison. His wife writes him a letter, and that letter was part of the archives that Professor Panikkar happened to consult. And this letter, the woman writes to her husband, and look at the phrase she uses. This garment for the upper part of the body that you have brought for me, your mother will not let me wear it. When I finish the household chores and I have taken a bath and I wear it, your mother says, where are you going all dressed up, you slut? So I have folded that garment and kept it in the trunk. I'll wear it for you when you are freed from prison. This is also early 20th century. There is no word in any Indian language for the blouse. It is called the blouse everywhere. There is no word for the petticoat. It is called the petticoat. And the sleeveless vest that women wear under their kurtas is called the chemise. 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 I don't know how to pronounce it properly. It has come to us from France. The petticoat is also of European origin. And if you travel to our tribal areas, you will see most of our Santhal women, Bhil women, and others in the remote areas. Many of them still do not wear either a petticoat or a blouse. This length of cloth, which we call the sari, they wrap it around themselves and they cover their torso also. The blouse is very new. The petticoat is very new. The chemise is very new. All three garments worn by women introduced to us only in the 18th, 19th century. The other garments that women wear, including the shalwar, the kurta, the gharara, the lehenga, the etc., whole lot of them have pre-existed the arrival of the British. But any garment that requires the use of scissors to cut cloth has origins from outside India. Now, this is the story of and all the clothes that men wear. Kurta pajama is one, shalwar kurta is another. Shalwar is probably from Afghanistan. Kurta and kameez have perhaps Turkish connections. T-shirts, shirts, trousers, track suits, they are obviously of European origin, many of them of English origin. So that is the story of fabrics, clothes that we wear. If you look at rituals, there are many temples in India that even today do not allow entry to worshippers if they are wearing anything that is stitched. Many temples in the south. You have to wrap yourself in an unstitched cloth, dhoti, and you can cover your shoulders with another length of cloth, and you can go into the temple. You cannot wear anything that is stitched. Several communities still use unstitched garments at the time of weddings, at the time when the child learns to read and write. The first lesson that is given, the child has to be dressed in unstitched cloth. A newborn baby is covered in unstitched cloth. And when your time is up and you leave, the body is wrapped in unstitched cloth. All rites of passage, birth, beginning of education, wedding, death, they are performed in large communities in India even today in unstitched garments. Because it was believed that once iron touches a cloth, it becomes impure and is not fit for use in rituals. So we'll leave the story of our clothes here. I think it gives you a basic framework. Now let's talk of food. Let me list things which are certainly Indian. Mango, with thousands of varieties. But mango is not unique to India. There is this belt across the equator on both sides of the equator where you have mango growing. So there's mango in Mexico and there's mango in Indonesia across this belt. But the phenomenal range of mangoes that one finds in India today, thousands of them, they are all a product of the genius of the Indian farmer. But there is an interesting twist to this. The large variety of mangoes happens through grafting. I recently learned that we knew grafting for a very long time, and we were practicing grafting in a whole lot of trees. But grafting was discouraged in mangoes because mango wood is used in rituals, and that is why grafting was discouraged. So perhaps grafting was introduced to India of the mango was started perhaps by the Portuguese in the 16th century, and then it spread, and then it is primarily the interest that the Mughals took in building gardens of mangoes and promoting grafting and so on and so forth, that we have this phenomenal range of mangoes. And the Mughals were very keen on fruit. I don't know how many of you are familiar, you must be familiar with this fruit which is called the plum. What do we call it in Hindi and Hindustani and Punjabi? We call it aloo bukhara. I've been to Bukhara. In Bukhara, it is called aloo. They have at least three kinds of plums. There is the regular aloo, which is what we know as aloo bukhara. Then there is shaftalu and there is zardalu. A yellow plum, there's another plum, and there is the aloo bukhara, which is known in Bukhara as aloo. These were introduced to India by Babar, who also introduced the apple and the pomegranate. Sorry. Aside from introducing the muskmelon and the watermelon and the pear, nashpati. None of these are of Indian origin. Neither is shahtut, also introduced by Babur. If you go to Agra, there is a sorry, Taj and a whole lot of the Agra fort are on one side of the Jamna. Other side of the Jamna, there is the Etmadud the Chini Karosa, and there is a garden which is now called the Rambagh. When I was a school child, it was known as Aram. Prior to that, it was known as Bagh-e Noor Afshan, the name given to it by Jahangir. And before that, it was known as Bagh-e Gul Afshan, the name given to it by Babur, who established this garden. It's the first Mughal garden in India. As you enter the garden, on your right and left, there are two huge marble slabs placed there by the Archaeological Survey of India based on their research. And that lists the number of fruit bearing trees that Babur planted in this garden. Most of them did not survive because of the heat, high temperatures of Agra, but all these fruits, which now grow in the hills, were introduced to India by the Mughals. And when they spread into the hills and they conquered Kashmir and all that, they introduced all these fruits, and now we consume them. But all of them have come to us from Uzbekistan, from Tajikistan, from Afghanistan, etc. Karela is Indian. Bangan is Indian. I don't know how many of you actually enjoy eating bangan, but bangan is absolutely Indian. The name in Sanskrit is Batingan, which got corrupted into bangan in Hindustani in the colloquial use, and then it traveled and it reached Afghanistan and it came to be known as Badingan, and then it reached Arabia and it came to be known as Al Bidinjan, and it traveled from there and reached England and came to be called France. It began to be called aubergine, and in England it became brinjal. The brinjal or the aubergine, one of them, crossed the Atlantic. In this journey from India to their journey across the Atlantic, other varieties developed through cross pollination, through change in climate, and so on and so forth. A variety that is the size of an egg and is white with a green crown. That is the variety that reached America, and they began to call it eggplant. What else? The eggplant has come back to India, and there are a whole lot of people who don't eat it because it looks like an egg. But it is absolutely Indian. Sesame seed, we have been cultivating it for a very, very long, very long. And before the groundnut arrived in India in the 1920s, just barely 100 years ago, all cooking in Gujarat used to happen with in sesame seed. Til ke tel mein khana pakta tha. So the traditional, within quote, Gujarati food did not taste like this 100 years ago. And this is an endless list. Aloo, potatoes. They were introduced to India by the Portuguese. But somehow they did not make a great impression on the west coast where the Portuguese first planted. The English, when they captured large part of the country, they took the and when they had become uh, they had come in control with Bombay, the seven islands that were put together, connected to each other with by English engineers, and given the name Bombay, which means a good port. Bomb from Portuguese and Bay from English, and that's how the city of Bombay came into existence. It is around that time that they discovered potato, the English, and they took it to Bengal. And from Bengal, they started spreading it along the foothills of the Himalayas. So, potatoes brought to India by the Portuguese, but spread through the intervention of the English. Tomatoes came from South America, as did the potatoes. You cannot, if anybody was to ask you what is Indian food, or what most people say when they are talking of Indian food, is the spiciness. It's very hot. And this hot element comes with chilies. There were no chilies in India before the Portuguese came. They brought all of them have come from Mesoamerica or Middle America, Mexico, and that area. That's how chilies have come into India. And that is why no Mughal ever ate Mughal food. Because there were no chilies in Delhi till the 18th century, brought in by the Marathas, by which time the Mughal Empire was almost folding up, and the Marathas had taken over Delhi. That is when chilies arrived in Delhi. And then they spread. Amrud, guava, South American origin. Pumpkin, kaddu, kumbhra, South America. French beans, they have nothing to do with France. They came from Africa, probably introduced to India by the French. So, and this getting information on all of this is not very difficult. Go to the Encyclopedia Britannica and type onions, comma, origin of, garlic, comma, origin of, turmeric, comma, origin of, and you will get all a compact uh, article which traces the entire history of how these things have traveled. Not too long ago, it was discovered that there was this community that has loosely been described as Austronesians. These are people who lived in the land or in a series of scattered islands between Australia and Indonesia. These people were great seafaring people, and they ceased to be about 1500 years before the birth of Christ, which would say roughly 3,500 years from today. And it is through them that a whole lot of fruits and vegetables were distributed. Fruits and vegetables that had their origins in Australasia. And these people carried them from Japan in the east to Tahiti in the west, and the southern tip of India and Africa, Madagascar, and where all. These people traveled and they carried whatever they found of interest, they carried it with them and they distributed. The point I'm trying to make is that the ideas of this is Indian and that is foreign. Is as far as food is concerned, as far as attire is concerned, is an idea that has no scientific basis. People have traveled. We know for certain, now all DNA studies have established that Homo sapiens began to move out of South Africa 70,000 years ago. 60,000 years ago, they were in central India, and they were in Australia, and they were in New Zealand 65,000 years. Some of them hugged they came out of South Africa, some of them turned east, reached the eastern coast of Africa, and they just walked along the coast. Some little water body they would have had to negotiate, and then they would be across into the mainland Asia, and hugging the coast, they came and they settled down in central India. The vast tribal population that is spread all over this country are descendants of those first migrants. And these people carried seeds with them. They carried uh, fruit with them. Some would have perished, some wouldn't have survived, but many were carried with them. And then the period which is known as the post-Columban era, after the time of Columbus, the phenomenal wealth of fruits and vegetables that were there in South America that the world had no idea about. But they have all come from there. You cannot imagine life in India without peanuts today. They came from South America. Pumpkin. Can you imagine a sitar? There were no sitars before the pumpkin came, because none of the Indian gourds were large enough to function as musical instruments, as echo chambers. That is what a tumba is, whether used in a tanpura or used in a sitar or in a veena or whatever. And those of you who are in Delhi, if you have time, go to the National Museum. There is a gallery of music, old musical instruments, and also in the Sangeet Natak Academy. Go and inspect them closely. Most of them, the echo chambers were carved out of trunks of trees till the pumpkin arrived. So it is not only food, it is also many of our musical instruments that were impacted by this exchange. And these exchanges were happening all over. The Chinese took the bark of a tree from around Indonesia and it traveled with them back to China. And from China, it traveled through the Silk Route to Arabia. And the Arabs began calling it the bark from China, Dar al-Chini. And it was with the Central Asians, it is introduced to North India. The South Indians have known about Darchini because the origin of Darchini it is estimated that the origin of Darchini is Sri Lanka. And from there, and some other islands in that area. But it had probably not spread to North India till it came through that route, and that's why we call it Darchini. Black pepper, Kali Mirch, is absolutely Indian. So is peepli. Peepli is a it's about centimeter or a little more. It looks like a shriveled, dehydrated shahtoot. This was exported from India to Greece, taken by Arabs who were trading with Greece and with India much before the birth of Islam. The Arabs have been trading with the west coast of India for maybe 1,000 years, maybe longer. They took it and then they took it to Greece. And Hippocrates, the father of medicine as he is known, has written about this herb, which he used to use to flavor his medicines. In India, it is known as peepli. He gave it the name pepper longum. That is the scientific name. And that is why when the black pepper reached there, it got the name pepper. Because black pepper and peepli have the same chemical in them, which is helpful in preserving meat. And that is why black pepper became so important in all over Europe, because they had no method of preserving meat through winter. They used to hunt in these autumn months, and then they had to survive on that meat through the dry, cold winter. And the meat used to rot till they got black pepper. The other spice that is absolutely 100% Indian is the green cardamom. And these two were very, very valuable in the international spice market. But long is not of Indian origin. It is now we cultivate huge quantities of it, but it was only in the late 1890s that the first clove trees were planted by the East India Company on the Malabar Hills, and they were brought from the Spice Islands. So, this is broadly the picture. Constantly things are coming. Now, you will say, well, what does India have? There are just two mother varieties of rice, just two. One has its origins in China, the other has its origins in India, in the Indo-Gangetic plain. The, the lentil that is most consumed in India is arhar, also known as tur. It is the most consumed dal in India. Without tur dal, there is no sambar. And all over East UP, Bihar, etc., it is consumed on a regular basis. And in all kinds of combinations, it is cooked. The arhar ki dal, the geographic indicator is Karnataka. That is where it first evolved. It's a different matter that now we have had to import arhar, and we are importing arhar from Arabia, but its origin is India. That is from here it has gone all over. Rice, two strains, one Indian, one Chinese. Sugarcane, two strains, one Indian, one Chinese. It is the Arab traders who took sugarcane from India and introduced it to Egypt. And on both banks of the Nile, cultivation of sugarcane began. And the Egyptians developed a technique of preparing a fully saturated solution of sugarcane juice. They used to store it in clay cylinders, and they used to hang a thread in it. and they will leave it undisturbed for months. And then, when all the sugar crystallized around the thread, then they'll break the cylinder, take out a pencil of sugar crystals, rub it vigorously, and the crystal will separate. The Egyptians used to use it as a mouth freshener. It traveled back to India, and that is why we call it Mishri, because it came from Misr. Sugarcane, we have Khan, we have Bura, we have Gur, we have Rab, we have Rasawal, whole range of things we make with sugar. All this together is called Khandasari or Khand. Khand traveled like the brinjal had traveled, Khand also traveled, became Kand, Gulkand, Zamikand, Shakarkand, Tashkand, Samarkand. And then it traveled and reached England. By the time it reached there, it became candy. And hard boiled sugar candy comes back to India. The Chinese developed the art of making granular sugar, and it came to India in trade exchanges, and that is why we call it chini. This Mauritius, Fiji, West Indies, these places produce huge quantities of sugarcane. Sugarcane was taken from India and by the British and planted in these places. And they took tens of thousands of indentured labor from uh, Bihar and Odisha. And it is this indentured labor and East UP that is the population of Mauritius and Fiji and West Indies. That is why you have Arvind Kalicharan playing for West Indies team. And you have Shiv Sagar Ramgulam, a prime minister of an earlier prime minister of Mauritius. These are people of Indian origin who were taken there because they were the only people who knew how to cultivate sugar. So this is broadly what the story of food is. I can go on that, but I think you get the general idea. I don't have too much time left, so I'll just briefly tell you that this idea that there is Islamic architecture and that there is Hindu architecture is a creation of those who colonized us. Architecture has no religion. Architecture is our response to our environment. What do we want to build? What is the kind of climate that we want to protect ourselves against? What is the material available? These things decide, and what is the level of technology at your disposal? These things decide the shape of architecture that you will build. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the stories that the dome is Islamic, that the arch is Islamic, and the minaret is Islamic. Just think about it. Do a cursory search on the origins of the dome, and you will know that the dome was first built in Rome, and it was built much before the birth of Islam. It was built even before the birth of Christianity. It had nothing to do with Islam. Once the dome had come into existence, Judaism, Jews, that was a religion that existed in the time of the great Roman Empire, great within quote. The Jews were the first to use the dome for worship, but it was not created for worship. It was probably built for the Roman Senate, where the senators had equal powers, and you did not have a head of table, everybody sat in a circle, and that is perhaps why parliaments all over the world follow that circular pattern. There is nobody as the head of the table. Everybody has equal rights. In the Roman Senate, Caesar and Brutus had equal power. Outside, Caesar was king. Inside, he was a senator. To create a space which is democratic and a space which is not cluttered with pillars so that everybody can see everybody else. It is this need that creates the dome. And the dome has evolved over a very long time. It couldn't have evolved without the invention of the arch. And the arch was invented or first used. I don't know who invented it, how it evolved, but the first use of the arch is in Sumeria. The Romans saw it there, brought it over ground. The Sumerians had a phenomenal network of reaching drinking water to every house, like we had in Mohenjo-daro. In Mohenjo-daro, we used to cover our open tunnels with flat, sun-dried bricks. In Sumer, they covered them under a small, narrow tunnel. To make a tunnel, you have to have stone pieces cut in the shape of wedges. Only then a tunnel you are able to make a arch, and you can't make a tunnel without the shape of the arch. That is where the Romans discovered it, brought it over ground, created aqueducts, and the aqueducts were later these large arches. Somebody started putting large size arches one next to the other. You had a huge corridor made with a whole lot of arches, no pillars. The weight of the ceiling comes onto the walls. That is how a whole lot of old churches were made. It is this vaulted roof that evolves into the dome. The largest dome in the world is the St. Peter's Basilica, built in the 10th century. And there is this huge white dome on the Capitol Hill in America. And there are thousands of domes in North America, South America, all over Europe, all over Australia, New Zealand, all over Africa. None of them built by Muslims. Domes were built in areas which did not have heavy rainfall. Domes required a flat roof. The biggest concentration of Muslims in India is in Kashmir. When you get an opportunity, travel to Kashmir and go and visit all the old mosques. There are no domes, there are no arches, there are no minarets. Except for one mosque, Hazrat Bal Mosque, which was built by an architect who went from Delhi. He was an uncle of mine. That is the only mosque that has a dome, old mosque that has a dome. In Kerala, Islam arrived in Kerala at the time when Prophet Muhammad was still alive. That is when the first mosque was built in Kerala. No domes, no arches, no minarets. In Indonesia and Malaysia, they are very old mosques. The new mosques have domes and all that, but all the old mosques are without domes, arches, and minarets. And no mosque in China And Islam has been in China from the 10th century. No domes, no arches, no minarets. There is no Islamic architecture. And similarly, there is no Hindu architecture. Nobody will talk to you about Christian architecture. They deliberately did not use the term Christian architecture. Their architecture is Gothic, is Renaissance, is Baroque, or it is Hispanic, Slavic, Prussian, and the four islands that had colonized us, their architecture is Scottish, Irish, Welsh, and English. But in this huge subcontinent, you only have Hindu architecture. They will not talk about the architecture developed by the Hoysalas, by the Cheras, by the Cholas, by the Gurjar Pratihars, or the architecture they developed in Bengal, the architecture they developed in Jaipur and Jodhpur and Jaisalmer and Tok and in Odisha, in Assam. No, only Hindu architecture. Because the idea that they are pushing is that the people that they had colonized were incapable of secular thought. Everything that they did had to be governed by their religious books. And they had no autonomy of ideas. They were bound by their religious books. Whereas Europe is secular. So they talk of the Hindu mind and they talk of the Muslim mind, but they don't talk of the Christian mind. They talk of the Renaissance mind. You see, so this whole thing of divide and rule, much thought has gone into it. It has been a very well thought out strategy. And those who continue to support this, despite all their protestations against colonial mindsets and all that, that is what they are promoting. Thank you. If there are any questions, we can take them.
Thank you, sir, for so many intriguing facts. And of course, the conversation, the lecture has been really enriching for us. Yes, sir, we have two questions in the chat box. Let me read it out to you. The first is by Saleh Sabri. I have heard that shoes, trousers, and saddles, etc., were brought by Kushan rulers, who were also instrumental in spreading the culture of India to Central Asia and China. Is it true? And yes, sir. And the second question, should I read it out or should I read it later?
Yeah, read it out.
Okay. Does the taste of fruits which are grown in Central Asia and the same which are brought by Mughals same?
Is the taste same?
Yes, the taste of fruits brought by the Central Asian and the one that Mughals have brought. Do they differ in taste or
No, it's
are they the
not.
same?
It is not, because the land is different, the climatic conditions are different,
Mm.
and the amount of rainfall that happens is different. The period of extreme cold is different. Apple requires a period of intense cold, and if it doesn't get that, it doesn't grow to full richness. So obviously, the tastes vary. I have eaten the kharbuz in Uzbekistan, and our kharbuza is not a patch on it. It is an incredibly fragrant, juicy fruit. You bite into it and the juice just runs down your mouth, the edges. In my case, runs down my beard. But it is a totally different fruit. It has developed into something else here. It came from there. It is, and similarly, the the way the brinjal tastes in Punjab and in Himachal, it doesn't taste like that in Kabul, and it doesn't taste like that at all in Turkey or in Uzbekistan. All of them consume brinjal. Brinjal is spread all over the world, and the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Central Asians and the West Asians, the Arabs, the Turks, they consume huge quantities of brinjal. Uh, so, but that their brinjal no longer tastes like the brinjal that we have. We have 500 varieties of brinjal in India. As for the first question, well, it's possible because that is what I'm getting at. That people traveled and they carried their food and their attire, and I don't know about shoes because they would have been uh, all Indians were not walking barefoot all this time, but they would have had other kinds of shoes. The kind of shoes that the Kushans wore could perhaps be different from the kind of, in any case, people who are spending a lot of time on horseback wear different kind of shoes as opposed to those who walk with their feet. Their shoes have to be different. So, but quite a lot of that is possible. And similarly, things would have gone from here.
Okay, is there any question? We can take one last question as we are already behind time. Okay, I believe there are no more questions. So let us proceed to the end of today's session. Sir, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks. Thanks to you for such a rich, insightful, and engaging
My pleasure
presentation.
entirely.
Specifically, your reflections on attire, food, and architecture. You have reminded us that these are not merely cultural artifacts, but living archives, bearing with them histories of exchange, adaptation, and shared belonging. Of course, your
Yes,
talk has also demonstrated how everyday practices and material forms carry the imprints of multiple communities and traditions, challenging narrow readings of the past, specifically at a time when history is often reduced to rigid categories or
yeah,
mobilized
yeah,
to divide. Your work encourages us to recover complexities, dialogue, and coexistence as central to India's historical experience. On behalf of the Indian History Forum, I would like to thank all of our participants for joining us this evening and for the thoughtful question engagement that enriched the discussion. Conversations such as these are central to our effort to promote informed, inclusive, and responsible engagements with history. And we hope today's webinar has offered you and, of course, us together new ways of thinking about the histories embedded in what we wear, what we eat, and the spaces we inhabit, and has reaffirmed the importance of approaching the past with care, curiosity, and critical reflection. Thank you once again, sir, for generously sharing your
thank you.
time and
Thank
insights
you
with
very
us.
much.
Yeah, we look forward to welcoming you to future events organized by the Indian History Forum. Until then, thank you and good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.